Martha pressed herself against the wall of the cramped cabin, trying to make herself invisible as her father's voice rose to a thunderous roar. The single room that housed all 7 members of the Brennan family reeked of desperation and unwashed bodies, the air thick with the kind of poverty that ground people down until there was nothing left but anger and blame. And lately, all that anger seemed to find its way to Martha. "Look at her!" Thomas Brennan shouted, gesturing wildly at his eldest daughter, "sitting there like a lump, eating us out of house and home while the rest of us starve. 20 years old and not a prospect in sight. What man would want something that size?" Martha's mother, Eleanor, wrung her hands but said nothing in her daughter's defense. She never did. The 4 younger Brennan children huddled in the corner, their hollow eyes watching the familiar scene play out with the detachment of those who had witnessed it too many times before. At nearly 300 pounds, Martha was indeed large, her body a constant reminder of better times when the Brennan farm had prospered, when there had been enough food and even some left over. Those days were long gone, destroyed by her father's gambling debts and poor decisions, but somehow Martha's size had become the family's most visible symbol of their fall from modest comfort to grinding poverty. "The debts are due next week," Thomas continued, his face red with rage and shame. $200 to the bank or we lose everything, everything. And here she sits, taking up space, consuming resources we don't have. "I've offered to find work," Martha said quietly, her voice barely audible. She had made this offer dozens of times, always met with the same response. "Work?" Her father laughed bitterly. "Who would hire you? You can barely fit through a doorway. No, you're useless for anything but—" He broke off, a calculating look entering his bloodshot eyes. Unless a knock at the door interrupted whatever terrible thought was forming in Thomas Brennan's mind. He crossed the small space in 3 strides and yanked the door open, revealing a tall figure silhouetted against the late afternoon sun. The man who stepped into the cabin seemed to fill the space despite its small size, commanding attention without saying a word. Silas Blackwood was known throughout the territory, though few claimed to know him well. He had arrived 5 years ago and purchased a sprawling ranch in the high country, paying in gold that raised eyebrows, but no official questions. He was powerfully built, with broad shoulders and a muscular frame that his simple clothes could not conceal. His dark hair was longer than was fashionable, touching his collar, and his eyes were an unusual shade of amber that seemed to catch and hold light in unsettling ways. Some said he was a former outlaw who had struck it rich. Others whispered darker things, crossing themselves when his name was mentioned, but everyone agreed that Silas Blackwood was dangerous in ways that went beyond the gun he wore low on his hip. "Mr. Brennan," Silas said, his voice deep and surprisingly cultured, "I heard in town that you have financial difficulties. I'd like to discuss a possible solution." Thomas's eyes lit with desperate hope, even as his wife stepped protectively closer to their younger children. Come in," he said eagerly. "What kind of solution?" Silas's amber gaze swept the cabin, taking in the poverty, the hungry children, and finally settling on Martha, who was trying unsuccessfully to disappear into the shadows. His expression was unreadable as he looked at her, but Martha felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. Unlike the disgusted or pitying look she usually received, his gaze seemed to see through her flesh to something beneath, something she herself had long forgotten existed. "I understand you owe the bank $200, Silas said, still looking at Martha. "I'm prepared to pay that debt, plus an additional $100 for your family's immediate needs. In exchange, I would ask for your daughter's hand in marriage." The silence that followed was absolute. Martha's heart stopped, then started again with painful force. Her father's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Even the younger children stirred from their apathy, eyes wide with shock. "Martha," Thomas finally managed to say, "you want to marry Martha?" "I do," Silas confirmed, but his eyes had not left Martha's face. "However, the choice must be hers. I won't take an unwilling bride, regardless of financial arrangements." This was so unprecedented, so completely outside the normal transactions of frontier life, that no one seemed to know how to respond. Men purchased brides through agencies, fathers arranged marriages for their daughters, but no one asked the woman herself, especially not a woman like Martha, who should be grateful for any attention at all. Thomas recovered first, greed overriding his shock. Of course she'll marry you. She'd be a fool to refuse. $300 would solve all our problems." "I wasn't speaking to you," Silas interrupted, his voice quiet, but carrying an edge that made Thomas fall silent immediately. He stepped further into the cabin, moving with fluid grace until he stood directly before Martha. Up close, she could see that his face was handsome in a harsh way, all strong angles and intensity, with a thin scar running along his jaw. He smelled of leather and pine, and something else she could not identify, something wild and ancient. "Miss Brennan," he said formally, as if they were in a drawing room rather than a poverty-stricken cabin. "My name is Silas Blackwood. I own a ranch 15 miles north of here, in the high country. It's isolated but comfortable, and I live alone aside from a few hired hands who work the cattle. I'm offering you a choice that I suspect you've rarely been given in your life, the choice to decide your own future." Martha stared at him, her mind reeling. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you want to marry me?" A slight smile touched Silas's lips, transforming his harsh features into something almost gentle. "Because I see something in you that your family apparently does not. Intelligence, strength, dignity, despite circumstances that would have broken most people. I've watched you in town, seen how you hold your head high, even when people whisper and point. That kind of courage is rare and valuable." Tears pricked Martha's eyes at the unexpected kindness, at being seen as something other than a burden or an object of mockery. "I don't know you," she said, trying to be practical, even as her heart hammered with desperate hope. "You could be anyone. Want anything from me?" "True," Silas acknowledged. "So let me be clear about what I'm offering and what I'm asking. I will pay your family's debts and provide for your future comfort. In exchange, I ask for your companionship, your help in managing my household, and your willingness to try to build a life together. I won't force anything you're not ready to give, and I promise to treat you with respect and consideration. If you choose to come with me, you'll never go hungry again, never be made to feel worthless again. You'll have a home where you're valued." He paused, his amber eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "But the choice is yours, Martha, no one else's. I'll wait outside while you think about it. Take as much time as you need." He turned and left the cabin, closing the door quietly behind him. The moment he was gone, Thomas erupted. What are you waiting for? Say yes. This is the best offer you'll ever get. Probably the only offer. $300, Martha. That money will save this family. Shut up, Thomas, Eleanor said suddenly, with more force than Martha had heard from her mother in years. She crossed to Martha and took her daughter's hands. Sweetheart, your father's right that this is likely your only chance at marriage, but wrong about everything else. What do you want? Really want? Martha looked at her mother's worn face and saw genuine concern there, perhaps the first she had shown her eldest daughter in months. I want to not be a burden anymore, she said honestly. I want to have value beyond how much food I consume. I want someone to look at me the way Mr. Blackwood just did, like I'm a person worth knowing. Then you have your answer, Eleanor said softly, squeezing her hands. Martha stood on trembling legs and walked to the door. Silas stood a respectful distance from the cabin, his powerful frame outlined against the setting sun. When he saw her, he straightened but did not approach, giving her space to speak on her own terms. "Mr. Blackwood," Martha called out, her voice stronger than she expected, "I accept your offer. I'll marry you." The smile that crossed his face was genuine and transformative. He approached the cabin, pulling a leather pouch from his coat. "Then let's make the arrangements. I'll pay your father now, and we can be married tomorrow by the town preacher. You'll come home with me immediately after." The next 24 hours passed in a blur. Thomas took the money with shaking hands, his protestations about waiting for a proper courtship dying when Silas fixed him with a cold stare that promised consequences for interference. Eleanor helped Martha pack her few belongings, 2 threadbare dresses, her mother's Bible, and a small wooden box containing letters from a grandmother she had never met. The wedding ceremony was brief and witnessed by strangers, conducted in the preacher's parlor rather than the church. Martha wore her best dress, which was still patched and faded, but Silas presented her with a simple gold ring that fit perfectly, as if he had known her size without asking. As they rode away from town in Silas's well-appointed wagon, Martha looked back once at the settlement that had been her entire world. Her family had not even come to see her married, and no one else had bothered to attend. She was leaving behind nothing but painful memories and entering a future she could not imagine. Beside her, Silas drove the horses with steady hands, his profile calm and unreadable. "Are you frightened?" he asked after they had traveled in silence for an hour. "Yes," Martha admitted, but also relieved. "Even if I don't know what's ahead, at least I know what I'm leaving behind." "A reasonable perspective," Silas said. "For what it's worth, I meant what I said. I'll give you time to adjust, to get comfortable. There's no rush for anything." The journey to Silas's ranch took 3 hours, the trail climbing steadily into pine-covered foothills. As they traveled, the landscape changed from the dry plains around town to cooler, greener country. When they finally crested a rise and Silas pointed out his property, Martha gasped. The ranch was far more substantial than she had imagined, a large 2-story house built of stone and timber, surrounded by well-maintained outbuildings and fenced pastures where cattle grazed. It looked prosperous and permanent, the home of someone with resources and plans. "It's beautiful," Martha breathed. "It's home," Silas said simply. "Or I hope it will become home for you as well." He helped her down from the wagon with surprising gentleness, his strong hands steadying her as her feet touched ground. A weathered man in his 50s, emerged from the barn, his eyes widening when he saw Martha, but quickly schooling his expression to neutrality. "Sam, this is my wife, Martha," Silas said firmly. "She's the lady of the house now, and I expect you and the other hands to treat her with appropriate respect." "Yes, sir, Mr. Blackwood," Sam said, tipping his hat to Martha. "Welcome, ma'am. Congratulations on your marriage." The interior of the house was even more impressive than the exterior. The main floor held a spacious kitchen with a modern stove, a dining room with a table that could seat 12, and a parlor filled with comfortable furniture, and Martha nearly wept when she saw them shelves upon shelves of books. The second floor had 4 bedrooms, each larger than the entire cabin her family had occupied. Silas showed her to the master bedroom, a beautiful space with a large bed, a wardrobe, and windows overlooking the mountains. "This is our room," he said, then quickly added, "but I can sleep in one of the other bedrooms until you're comfortable sharing a bed. There's no pressure, Martha. We have time." That night, Martha lay alone in the enormous bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. She had gone from unwanted burden to married woman in the space of 24 hours, had traded her family's cramped cabin for a house that seemed like a mansion. Her husband was a stranger, albeit a kind one, and she had no idea what tomorrow would bring. But as she drifted toward sleep in clean sheets and a warm room, she felt something she had not experienced in years, hope. The following weeks revealed a rhythm to life at the Blackwood Ranch that Martha gradually learned to navigate. Silas was an early riser, often gone before dawn to work with his cattle or oversee his hired hands. He returned for a midday meal, then disappeared again until evening. Martha found her place in managing the household, cooking, cleaning, tending the vegetable garden that supplied their kitchen. It was hard work, but satisfying in ways that her previous life had never been. Here, her efforts were appreciated rather than resented, but it was the evenings that Martha came to treasure most. After dinner, Silas would retreat to the parlor with a book, and he had made it clear that Martha was welcome to join him. The first time she timidly selected a volume from his shelves, a collection of poetry by Longfellow, his face had lit with genuine pleasure. "You read?" he had asked, not with surprise but with satisfaction, as if confirming something he had suspected. "My mother taught me when I was young," Martha explained, "before things got difficult. I've always loved books, but we couldn't afford them." "Then please, consider my library yours," Silas had said warmly. "I've collected these over years of travel, and they deserve to be read and enjoyed." So their evenings fell into a pattern. They would sit in comfortable chairs by the fireplace, each with a book, occasionally reading passages aloud to each other or discussing what they had read. Silas, Martha discovered, was remarkably well educated, able to discuss philosophy, science, literature, and history with equal facility. He listened to her opinions with genuine interest, never dismissing her thoughts or making her feel foolish. "You have a keen mind," he told her one evening, after she had made a particularly insightful observation about a character's motivations in the novel they were reading. "It's been wasted, trapped in circumstances that gave you no opportunity to develop it. That's a crime." Martha felt tears prick her eyes at the praise. "No one has ever said anything like that to me before." "Then they're fools," Silas said flatly. "Physical appearance is the least interesting thing about any person. It's what's in here." He tapped his forehead, and here he touched his chest over his heart, that matters. You're intelligent, thoughtful, and kind, despite having every reason to be bitter. That makes you magnificent, Martha." Slowly, carefully, they were building something that felt like friendship, perhaps even the foundations of love. Silas was unfailingly courteous, but Martha could not help noticing the way his eyes sometimes lingered on her, not with disgust or pity, but with something that looked almost like desire. It confused and thrilled her in equal measure. But there were oddities, too, things that made Martha wonder about the man she had married. Silas never ate with her during the day, claiming he had already eaten or would eat later. She never saw food disappear from the kitchen or larder, yet he claimed to have had meals. He was often absent at night, sometimes not returning until nearly dawn, with no explanation beyond vague references to ranch business. And there were the locked doors, a cellar she was forbidden to enter, a storage room that was always secured, areas of the house that were inexplicably off-limits. Martha told herself she was being paranoid, that every person was entitled to their secrets, especially in a marriage as new and unusual as theirs. But the mysteries gnawed at her, particularly as her feelings for Silas deepened from gratitude to something warmer and more dangerous. 2 months into their marriage, on a night when Silas had been particularly attentive during their evening reading, Martha found the courage to approach him about the sleeping arrangements. They had continued to occupy separate bedrooms, Silas keeping his promise not to rush her. But Martha was beginning to feel that she was ready for more, that she wanted to truly be his wife in every sense. "Silas," she said quietly, setting down her book, "I've been thinking about our marriage, about us." He looked up, his amber eyes alert. "Yes? You've been so patient with me, so kind, but I feel like we're living as friends or housemates rather than husband and wife. And I'd like that to change, if you still want me." Silas set his own book aside and crossed to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Martha, I've wanted you since the day I walked into your family's cabin and saw the strength in your eyes despite your circumstances. But I needed you to be ready to choose this freely. Are you certain?" "I'm certain," Martha said, her heart racing. "I want to be your wife truly. I want us to share a bed, share our lives completely." The smile that crossed Silas's face was tender and hungry all at once. "Then tonight," he said softly, "if you'll have me." But that night never came. As Silas led Martha toward the stairs, a tremendous crash of thunder shook the house, followed by a torrential downpour. Silas froze on the stairs, his entire body going rigid. His face, which had been soft with desire moments before, transformed into something harsh and almost frightened. "I need to—" he began, then shook his head. "Martha, I'm sorry. I need to check something in the barn. The storm might have damaged the roof. I'll be back soon." He practically ran from the house, leaving Martha standing alone on the stairs, confused and hurt. She waited for an hour, then 2, but Silas did not return. Finally, worried despite her confusion, Martha wrapped herself in a heavy cloak and ventured out into the storm. The barn was dark and quiet. The animals settled despite the weather. Martha was about to return to the house when she saw light coming from beneath a door at the back of the barn, a door she had never noticed before. Moving quietly, she approached and pressed her ear to the wood, hearing what sounded like a man's voice speaking in low, urgent tones. She should have turned away, should have respected Silas's privacy. But need and fear and curiosity overwhelmed propriety. Martha tried the door handle and found it unlocked. She pushed it open slowly, revealing a small room lit by a single lantern. And there, in the flickering light, she saw her husband. Silas knelt on the floor, his shirt discarded, his muscular back toward her. But it was not his state of undress that made Martha gasp. It was the scars. His entire back was covered in them, thick raised ridges crisscrossing his skin in a pattern that spoke of systematic torture. And on his left shoulder blade, burned into the skin, was a brand mark, a stylized letter O, that Martha recognized with horror from wanted posters she had seen in town. The mark of the Outlaw Brotherhood, a gang of notorious criminals who had terrorized the territory a decade ago. Silas spun at her gasp, his face a mask of anguish and fear. "Martha," he breathed, "you shouldn't be here. You shouldn't have seen—" "Who are you?" Martha whispered, though she was beginning to understand. "What are you?" Silas stood slowly, making no move to cover his scarred back, letting her see the full truth of what he was. "My real name is Silas Blackwood, that much is true. But 15 years ago, I was known by another name, Ghost Rider, lieutenant in the Outlaw Brotherhood. I robbed banks and stages, killed men, terrorized innocent people. I was a monster, Martha." He took a shaky breath, his amber eyes pleading for understanding. "I left the Brotherhood 10 years ago, after they killed a family during a robbery, including children. I couldn't stomach it anymore, couldn't be part of that evil. But you don't just leave the Brotherhood. They found me, tortured me, branded me, and left me for dead as a warning to others." Martha's mind reeled as pieces fell into place, the mysterious wealth, the isolation, the locked doors, the way townsfolk whispered about him with fear and suspicion. "You're wanted by the law?" "I was," Silas said. "The Brotherhood was broken up 8 years ago, most of its members killed or captured. I survived by hiding, by becoming someone else. I've tried to atone by living honestly, by helping people when I can. But I'm still marked, Martha, still a wanted man in some territories. If certain people knew who I really was, where I was, they'd come for me, and anyone associated with me would be in danger." He sank back down, his powerful frame suddenly looking defeated. "I should have told you before we married. I should have given you the choice. But I was selfish. When I saw you in that cabin, saw your strength and your dignity, I wanted you so badly. I wanted something good and pure in my life, wanted to believe I could have a real future. I convinced myself it didn't matter, that the past was dead. But it's not. It never is." Martha stood frozen, processing this revelation. Her husband was a former outlaw, a violent criminal who had killed and stolen. Everything she thought she knew about him was built on a foundation of secrets and lies. She should be terrified. She should run. But as she looked at Silas kneeling on the floor, his scarred back a testament to his own suffering, she saw not a monster, but a man who had made terrible choices and paid a terrible price. She thought about the gentle way he had treated her, the respect he had shown, the way he had given her choice when no one else had. She thought about his cultured voice discussing literature, his patient teaching, his obvious attempt to build a better life from the ashes of a darker one. "Stand up," Martha said quietly. Silas obeyed, his face resigned to rejection, to the loss of the fragile happiness they had been building. Martha approached him slowly, her eyes never leaving his. When she was close enough to touch, she reached out and traced one of the scars on his shoulder with gentle fingers. "These hurt you," she said. "Someone hurt you badly." "I deserved it," Silas said flatly, "for what I did, for the people I hurt." "No one deserves torture," Martha interrupted firmly, "no matter what they've done. And Silas, whatever you were 15 years ago, you're not that person anymore. I've lived with you for 2 months. I've seen how you treat your workers, how carefully you've built this place, how you've treated me. The man who did those things was young and stupid and caught up in something evil. The man standing before me now is trying to be better." Tears were streaming down Silas's face now, cutting tracks through the dust on his cheeks. "You're not leaving?" "I'm not leaving," Martha confirmed. "You gave me a choice about marrying you. Now I'm making another choice to stay, to build this life with you, secrets and scars and all. You saw me when no one else did, Silas. You saw value in someone society had written off as worthless. How can I do less for you?" With a sound that was half sob, half laugh, Silas pulled Martha into his arms, holding her as if she were precious and fragile despite her size. She wrapped her arms around his scarred back, accepting all of him past and present, darkness and light. They stood like that for a long time, the storm raging outside while inside, two damaged souls found shelter in each other. That night, they finally shared a bed as husband and wife. Their love-making was tender and awkward and beautiful, two people learning each other's bodies and hearts simultaneously. Silas was patient with Martha's inexperience and insecurity about her size, and Martha was gentle with the emotional wounds that ran even deeper than the physical scars on Silas's back. When it was over, they lay tangled together, and Martha felt more complete than she had in her entire life. "I love you," Silas whispered in the darkness. "I know it's too soon. I know I don't deserve to say it after keeping so much from you. But I do. I love you, Martha." "I love you too," Martha replied, because it was true. Somewhere between those quiet evenings by the fire and his patient kindness, somewhere between his fierce defense of her value and his willingness to trust her with his darkest secrets, she had fallen completely, irrevocably in love with this complicated, damaged, honorable man. They had 3 months of quiet happiness after that revelation. Martha learned more about Silas's past in bits and pieces, the poverty that had driven him to crime, the mentor who had twisted his desperation into violence, the slow awakening of conscience that had finally driven him away from the brotherhood. She shared her own pain, the years of being made to feel worthless, the constant hunger not just for food, but for affection and respect, the way her family's rejection had hollowed her out, until Silas filled that emptiness with genuine love. But peace, Martha was learning, was always fragile. Trouble arrived in the form of her father, accompanied by half the men from town, riding up to the Blackwood Ranch on a cold October morning. Silas and Martha were in the kitchen when they saw the riders approaching, and Silas's face went pale. "Stay inside," he told Martha, reaching for his gun belt. "Let me handle this." But Martha grabbed his arm. "No, whatever this is, we face it together. That's what marriage means." They went out onto the porch together, presenting a united front as Thomas Brennan dismounted, his face flushed with righteous anger and something else, fear, mixed with greed. Behind him, the townsfolk shifted uncomfortably, clutching rifles and looking uncertain about why they were there. "Thomas," Martha said coldly, "what do you want?" "I've come to save you, daughter," Thomas said, though his eyes kept darting nervously to Silas. "To save you from this monster you've married." Monster? Martha's voice was dangerously quiet. What are you talking about? We know what he is, Thomas continued, pulling a yellowed wanted poster from his coat. Martha's heart sank as she recognized the sketch, a younger Silas, harder looking, with the words, Ghost Rider wanted for murder and robbery, printed beneath. He's a criminal, Martha, an outlaw. The law is looking for him, and there's a reward, a big reward. So that was it. Thomas had somehow discovered Silas's past and seen an opportunity to profit from his own daughter's marriage. Martha felt rage bubble up inside her, hot and cleansing. I know who my husband is, she said clearly, loud enough for all the assembled men to hear. I know his past, and I've chosen to stand beside him anyway. You have no right to interfere in my life, Father. You sold me to clear your debts, remember? You gave up any claim to me the day you took Silas's money. He's dangerous, Thomas insisted, but his eyes betrayed him. He did not believe Martha was in danger. He believed in that reward money. Come home with us, Martha. We'll protect you. Martha laughed a harsh sound. Protect me? You who made me feel worthless every day of my life? You who called me a burden and wished I had never been born? Silas Blackwood has shown me more kindness and respect in 3 months than you did in 20 years. Whatever he was, whatever he did, he's been a better man to me than you could ever dream of being. She stepped forward, her considerable size suddenly seeming powerful rather than shameful. I choose him. I choose to stay with my husband, to build a life here. And if you or anyone else tries to take him from me, you'll have to go through me first. The assembled men shifted uncomfortably. They had come expecting to rescue a helpless woman from a violent criminal, not to face down a wife fiercely defending her husband. Some of them looked ashamed, realizing they had been manipulated by Thomas's greed. But there were others, harder men, who stepped forward with their rifles raised. The law's the law, one of them said. There's a reward out for Ghost Rider, dead or alive. Your feelings don't change that, Mrs. Blackwood. Silas had been silent through this entire exchange, but now he moved to stand beside Martha, his hand finding hers. The reward was rescinded 5 years ago, he said calmly, when the territorial governor granted amnesty to former Brotherhood members who had left before the final crimes and were willing to testify. I provided testimony that helped convict the gang's leaders. I'm no longer wanted, and you can verify that with the territorial marshal's office. He's lying, Thomas spat, trying to save his own skin. I'm not, Silas interrupted, pulling documents from his pocket. I have the pardon right here, signed by Governor Harrison himself. I've carried it for 5 years, waiting for the day someone from my past caught up with me. I'm legally free and clear, so you've ridden all this way for nothing, gentlemen. There's no reward, no criminal to capture, just a man trying to live honestly with the woman he loves. He handed the documents to the nearest townsman, who examined them carefully and passed them to others. Martha watched faces change as they read, saw greed turn to embarrassment, hostility shift to sheepishness. It's legitimate, the man finally announced. Signed and sealed proper. Mr. Blackwood's telling the truth. Thomas's face went purple with rage. This is a trick. He's fooled you all. The only one trying to fool anyone is you, Father, Martha said coldly. You came here hoping to profit from my misery one more time, hoping to sell information about my husband the way you sold me. Well, it didn't work. Now get off our property and don't come back. You're not welcome here. You ungrateful, Thomas started toward Martha, his hand raised as if to strike her. He never landed the blow. Silas moved with startling speed, catching Thomas's wrist in an iron grip and pulling him close. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but deadly. "Touch my wife, and amnesty or no amnesty, I will show you exactly why they called me Ghost Rider. Martha is under my protection now, and I protect what's mine. Do you understand?" Thomas nodded frantically, all his bluster evaporating in the face of Silas's barely controlled violence. Silas released him with a slight shove, and Thomas stumbled backward. "All of you, leave," Silas said, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "Martha has made her choice freely. She's chosen to stay with me, to build a life here. If anyone has a problem with that, speak now or accept it and move on." Silence greeted his challenge. One by one, the townsmen mounted their horses and turned away, some nodding respectfully to Martha and Silas, others too embarrassed to meet their eyes. Thomas was the last to leave, shooting venomous looks back at his daughter, but even he finally conceded defeat and rode away. When they were finally alone, Martha sagged against Silas, the adrenaline that had sustained her through the confrontation suddenly draining away. "I thought they were going to take you," she whispered. "I thought I was going to lose you." "Never," Silas said fiercely, crushing her against his chest. "You stood up for me, Martha. You defended me in front of everyone, told the world you chose me despite everything. Do you have any idea what that means to me?" "It means I love you," Martha said simply. "It means you're mine, and I protect what's mine too." Silas laughed, the sound full of joy and relief. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? The outlaw and the girl nobody wanted, standing against the world." "The world can go hang," Martha said, pulling him toward the house. "We have each other, and that's enough." In the months and years that followed, Martha and Silas built a life that became legend in the territory. Their ranch prospered, their devotion to each other never wavered, and slowly, gradually, even the skeptical townspeople came to accept and respect them. Martha bloomed in an environment of love and respect, her sharp mind finding expression in managing the ranch's accounts, and eventually in writing essays about frontier life that were published in territorial newspapers. Silas, for his part, found redemption not in grand gestures, but in daily choices treating his workers fairly, helping neighbors in need, being the kind of man his younger self could never have imagined becoming. The scars on his back remained, but they no longer defined him. He was defined instead by his love for his wife, his commitment to living honorably, and the family they built together. 3 years after their marriage, Martha gave birth to a daughter they named Grace. Holding her tiny child in her arms, Martha thought about the girl she had been unloved, unwanted, convinced of her own worthlessness. She thought about how close she had come to never experiencing this joy, this completeness. "What are you thinking?" Silas asked, sitting beside her on the bed, his finger gently clasped by their daughter's tiny hand. "I'm thinking about choices," Martha said softly, "about how a single moment of kindness, a single offer of respect can change everything. You gave me a choice when no one else would, Silas. You saw value in me when I couldn't see it in myself. And now look at us. We have this perfect little person, this life we've built. It's everything I never dared to dream of." "We saved each other," Silas corrected gently. "I was lost until I found you, Martha. Your love redeemed me in ways amnesty never could. You made me want to be worthy of you." "You were always worthy," Martha said. "You just needed someone to see it." As the sun set outside their window, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple, the Blackwood family, the former outlaw, the girl nobody wanted, and their precious daughter settled into the peace they had fought so hard to claim. Their story would be told for generations in the territory, a testament to the power of seeing past surfaces to the truth beneath, of choosing love over judgment, of building something beautiful from broken pieces. And in the quiet moments, when the work was done and their daughter slept peacefully in her cradle, Martha would sometimes catch Silas looking at her with wonder in his amber eyes, as if he still could not quite believe his fortune. She would smile and take his hand, secure in the knowledge that they had found in each other exactly what they needed, not a rescue, but a partnership, not salvation, but recognition, not pity, but love that saw all their scars and imperfections and chose them anyway, fiercely and forever.